Did you ever hear the story of the cake? You know, there are these food connoisseurs. You ever read the back of wines? The funniest thing, these guys must be drunk. It has nuts of blueberries or aromas of, I don't know, cantaloupe. Like, what are you thinking? This is wine. But the point is that there's a very important lesson in life here. Generally speaking, and this is very important, that's why I'm sharing with it, even though I don't like to be political, there's only a couple of ingredients that go into a cake. So let's say it's a chocolate cake. You got chocolate. Let's say you got a little vanilla. You have some salt. You have sugar. You have oil. You have flour. That's it. That's your cake. So, there's the mud cake, and what does that mean? It means there's a lot of chocolate, right? Or a lot of oil with chocolate. So the point is that everything, all the foods that you ever eat are made up of ingredients. And this is very important because all human beings only have 5 ingredients. And when you understand this, you understand this is just on a very simple level. What's the difference between conservative, liberal, and radical? So let's start with the radical because that's very, very important to understand. Who have been radicals in life? Well, Arafat, terrorists, um, the radical Black Panthers, they were terrorists. Um, you have, ironically, Obama's mentor, Bill Ayers, what do they call him? The weather terrorist man. It's a terrorist. Now, he got involved in the education system, which we'll discuss soon. Um, you have, obviously, communism. It was a radical thing. And, of course, Nazism is the best example. So all the radicals have one thing in common, and that is that they're violent. They use violence and coercion as opposed to words. The next thing that you have is you have the liberal idea. Now, the liberal idea in its pure form, not its violent form, because once it becomes violent, then it's radical. It's not liberal anymore. The liberal idea is that basically, let's not have any values. Let's just do whatever we want. And that idea basically is based on the sexual instinct. Again, everything boils down to certain ingredients. And that idea really comes to, historically, it's come to countries that have been prosperous, like Greece. And what happens is that the country develops, it has a system, and usually the democracy of the system allows there to be prosperity. And then in the prosperity, you have this kind of these lazy people. And I taught in university, and university professors, they are the real privileged people because they basically, after 9 years, you can get yourself a lifetime. It's called tenure. You're there for life. And basically, you don't even have to teach that much. You have all the time in the world. There are months and months where students are in school. So you're basically lazy. And then the sexual instinct becomes part of your appetite, and you don't want to kind of look bad. So what you do is you just pretend to be righteous. So what you do is you begin to justify that instinct, and that's what happened in the Renaissance when things were prosperous in Europe and people were free, even though it was under kings, but still they believed in freedoms. They gave people the freedom to say what they wanted. And so the bottom line is that the liberalism per se is really just the sexual instinct trying to dominate all of reality. It's an instinct. So just like the radicalism is hatred against others, which, as game theory proves, is a very real thing. People that feel fear of others begin to hate others. Liberalism is just the desire to have a sexual drive and take away any sense of morality because that's what the sexual drive is. It's just like a person addicted to food. He doesn't want to know that he should be on a diet. He just wants to eat. And then you have, of course, conservatism. Conservatism uses common sense. And there's a large Pew poll that shows this, that basically the left has gone really radical. 27% of the country has gone to the left, to the point where they're just consistently liberal. They don't have an opinion of their own. They're just like a brainwashed machine. And they make up 45% in the most active part of the Democratic Party. Whereas 27% of the country that is Republican, there's only 6% that are consistently conservative. So those 26% are really independently thinking. They happen to lean towards conservative, and that's a very important thing to think. Because when you think, you can decide, is it true, is it not true, what is right, what is wrong. And so that's where discernment comes in. It's not radical. I'm not here coercing people. I'm saying there's a truth. We have to do the truth. It's an obligation. It's something that we have to work towards. The sexual instinct is like, don't tell me truth. I just want to have sex. So that's why if you just understand these three ingredients in the human being, and we all have them, even the person who's evil has a sense of right and wrong, and even the person who has a sex drive, even the person who's good has a sex drive, is something that he has to overcome. So as long as we're just kind of honest with ourselves, and really, if you want to put it into simple words, and this all in Jewish mysticism, it's in much of Eastern philosophy, we say there are three rulers that rule man. We have the mind. That's where you can think about right and wrong, true and not true, good and bad. You have the heart. That the heart basically is emotional. What are the emotions that it wants? It wants pleasure. Sex is just a pleasure. It's just like an addiction. That's all it is. Like people that's clamoring for, well, let's have, I don't know, free drugs or whatever. They're just addicts. They just like drugs. That's all it is. It's not a great philosophy. My brother-in-law, who's very bright, he's the dean of a Talmudic academy. So he says the story of a guy. This guy is in a theater in Israel, and he's wearing a hat. So a guy behind him says, "Please do me a favor, take off the hat." So he says, "No, my policy is that I wear hats." So finally gets frustrated. He takes off his hat and he throws it. And it turns out the guy's bald. So he says, don't make out of a bald head a policy. So that's what a lot of this kind of liberalism does. It tries to make out of an instinct a policy. You're just a horny person. That's all you are. That's it. Let's keep it simple. And then finally, you have evil. And that's where you get people like Obama. They're very, very righteous. And yet these are the people that do the most evil. 500,000 people dead in Syria because of him. ISIS, the amount of people that they killed and traumatized. Libya civil war because of him. Just because so many people are so stupid they don't realize it, I'm just going to bring it out. Egypt civil war. What else did he do? A Yemen civil war. You know what a civil war is? It's horrific stuff. Horrific. 50 million refugees because of this one schmuck. And in America, the amount of racial hatred that he caused, that's because he's a violent person. He likes violence. And it may be very difficult for you to understand that because they come across as so nice and so funny, but they're not funny. Look at what they do. And that's because the instinct, when people, he wrote a book called Dreams of My Father. He was abandoned by his father. Like, this doesn't take some kind of theory or conspiracy. This is the book that he himself wrote, titled Dreams of My Father. He was abandoned by his father, and he has this resentment. And that resentment is anger, and anger creates jealousy. And that's all these terrorists, all these people, the same story. I have a friend who was a former PLO terrorist. He worked with Arafat. He was a murderer. And thank God he found Christianity. He became a friend of the Jews. But he says it very clearly. What's in the Arabs? Why do they have something against the Jews? 4,000 years ago, they were kicked out of the home. They still have this shame, this resentment, this pain. So I'm not going to go into that whole story. I've spoken about it before. But the point is, what was Hitler after? Hitler was after murder. He was after destruction because he himself was a miserable person. If you don't understand that, you don't understand the ingredients that shape a human being. There's been all throughout history, there's been murder. Even now, living in Africa, tribes kill each other. So unless you understand the ingredients in the cake, you don't understand the motivations. But once you do accept it, and that's the thing, you have to accept it. That's the fact. People that are violent, they want to be violent. They're not standing against injustice. They are injustice. People that are saying, oh, there are no rules, free sex, they're just kind of people that are overcome by their sexual instinct, and that could be in many different things, whether it's drugs. They just have they're lacking self-discipline and common sense, or their common sense has been overtaken by their instinct. And last but not least, you have people who have common sense, and that's called conservatives. That's called people that thinking that they usually follow God because that's where the source of truth and morality is. And it's a hard life. It's not an easy life. That's a life of dedication to truth and to ideals, but it's a meaningful life.